Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Several European airlines have said that they will not fly over Belarus days after a dissident journalist was arrested on a flight diverted to Minsk. Air France is the latest major carrier to ban overflights. Neighbouring Ukraine and Poland are stopping all flights to and from Belarus. Western countries accuse Belarus of hijacking the Ryanair plane carrying journalist Roman Protasevich on Sunday. The Greece-Lithuania flight was rerouted over a supposed bomb threat. Mr. Protasevich faces charges relating to his reporting of last August's disputed election and subsequent crackdown on mass opposition protests. Mali's vice president has said he removed the president and prime minister because they violated the terms of the transition by not consulting him on cabinet changes. Assimi Goïta said that President Bardour and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane have been stripped of their powers and promised elections in 2022. Bardour and Mokhtar Ouane are thought to have been detained by soldiers and driven to a military camp near the capital Bamako. The two men have been leading an interim government which took power after a military coup last August. The African Union, the EU and the US have all called for their release. The US Secretary of State has pledged to help rebuild Gaza as part of efforts to bolster a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel.
You took a bold position, clear position.
In part of a Middle East mission, Antony Blinken also made clear that the United States intended to ensure that Hamas, which it regards as a terrorist organization, does not benefit from humanitarian aid. The Secretary of State began his regional visit in Jerusalem, where he held talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Speaking to reporters with Mr. Blinken on his side, Mr. Netanyahu threatened a very powerful response if Hamas renewed cross-border rocket strikes. The truce, brokered by Egypt and coordinated with the United States, began last Friday after 11 days of fighting. Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary has said Tokyo believes there is no change in US support for holding the Olympics, despite its issuing a do not travel advisory for Japan. Mr. Kato also said that the Japanese government has received an explanation from the United States that the decision is not related to the dispatch of the athletes. The new guidance by the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention says travellers should avoid all travel to Japan. In Peru, leftist Shining Path militants have killed at least 14 people, including 2 children in a remote region of the country known for cocoa production. Peru says the militant group responsible for one of Latin America's deadliest conflicts killed more than a dozen people over the weekend. The Justice Minister blamed rebels with the Shining Path for the massacre. Pamphlets were found at the site telling Peruvians not to vote on June the 6th. A Nepali Sherpa who scaled Mount Everest for a record 25th time earlier this month has arrived back in the capital of Kathmandu. Kami Rita Sherpa beat his own record on May the 7th after he ascended as part of a group that was the first to reach the summit in more than a year. There was a small crowd of supporters at the airport for his arrival. Kami, who goes by his first name, scaled the nearly 9,000-metre mountain via the traditional Southeast Ridge route with 11 other Sherpa climbers. He said he hoped his accomplishment represented something big for the whole country. And finally, city dwellers are learning how to keep wolves at bay in the mountains of eastern Switzerland, helping sheep and goat farmers protect their flocks. Around 100 wolves live in the wild in Switzerland and their numbers are rising. A referendum last year on whether to make it easier to shoot wolves deemed a threat to livestock exposed divergent attitudes towards the animals from urban voters keen on protecting wildlife and from rural voters who have to put up with the wolves. Under a programme called Voluntary Shepherds, city dwellers are learning practical skills such as putting up electrified fences in a correct way to keep sheep in and wolves out. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.